Stamp collecting is more than a hobby. It can be a window into our past. Examining the causes of the French Indochina War as illustrated by the postage stamp. Both the Viet Minh and the French agree the war ended at Dien Bien Phu on July 5, 1954. The Viet Minh. War started in Haiphong, November 20th, 1946. The French. War started in Hanoi, December 19th, 1946. When a war starts, truth is the first casualty. French Indochina becomes North Vietnam. In 1940, Japan invaded French Indochina and maintained an effective occupying army, but cooperated with the Vichy French government, which continued to perform administrative duties in the French colony, including printing postage stamps. These stamps were printed at the IDEO plant in Hanoi, as indicated by the logo on the bottom of the stamp. The Vichy French government issued a series of stamps honoring Frenchmen who had helped create and defend the colony, or had made money to aid France. They also honored kings from neighboring countries. At the close of the war, Japan's Indochina forces surrendered to the Viet Minh guerrillas rather than the European allies, in keeping with their philosophy of Asia for Asians. Along with all of their weapons, the surrender included the stamp printing plant and the already printed French Indochina stamps. These French Indochina stamps from the IDEO plant were overprinted in Vietnamese Democratic Republic of Vietnam and included inspiring propaganda slogans. Most of the stamps were overprinted with the usual slogans: child welfare, new life movement, war wounded, national defense, people's livelihood, independence, freedom, happiness, campaign against illiteracy, except for one stamp with the words famine relief. What famine? What relief? Searching books considered to be the most objective and unbiased histories of Vietnam failed to provide any mention of a famine. By accident, I discovered a used and battered paperback titled The Struggle for Indochina, 1940 to 1955, published by Stanford Press. It provided the first and only detailed information on the 1944 famine that devastated North Vietnam. The 1944 Northern Vietnam famine happened because the French and Japanese government ordered that large acreage of industrial crops, such as jute, oilseeds, and opium, be planted instead of rice. The crops were needed for the Japanese war effort and France's treasury. Heavy rains caused severe flooding and destroyed the dikes protecting the small rice plantings. What little had been planted of the nation's primary food crop was wiped out. Flooding prevented the North from receiving rice shipments from South Vietnam. South Vietnamese civilians had adequate rice and were unaware of the Northern Vietnam famine conditions. The French-Japanese government did nothing to help the country's starving North Vietnamese. 1 million North Vietnamese men, women, and children would die from the famine, leaving only the sounds of crying, hungry children. Contrary to the indifference of the French-Japanese government, the Viet Minh launched a nationwide replanting program of food crops, dike repair, and other efforts at famine relief. The North Vietnamese credited the Viet Minh for ending the famine. The grief suffered by the North Vietnam famine survivors would fuel the fires of revenge toward any foreign occupier or those who befriended them for many years to come. The Viet Minh began to develop an army of motivated North Vietnamese volunteers, armed with the surrendered Japanese weapons. On March 6, 1946, a signed agreement between France and the Viet Minh recognizes the Democratic Republic of Vietnam as a free state with its own government and parliament. The agreement also stated a 5-year period of transition for the French to maintain an army for the protection of the French citizens residing in North Vietnam. These stamps were printed in the IDEO plant, now renamed the Bank of Hanoi. The Viet Minh the Viet Minh agreed to France's 5-year transition period rather than allowing the Chinese to return. France agreed in order to allow themselves time to rebuild their army. North Vietnam remained peaceful from March 1946 to November of that year, when violence broke out. The agreement had lasted 8 months. November 20th, 1946. According to the North Vietnamese, the French Indochina War begins. A signed agreement exists between the French and the Vietnamese declaring the independence of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. An argument over collecting customs duties gives the French an excuse to teach the Vietnamese a hard lesson. The lesson? French bombardment of Haiphong, killing 6,000 North Vietnamese civilians. The Viet Minh government and army moved to the jungle to escape the French and mount a resistance to renewed French hostility. December 19th, 1946. According to the French Indochina War begins. The Viet Minh attack Hanoi at night, killing 34 French civilians. The power plant is bombed, cutting off the city's electricity. The stamp printing plant is destroyed by bombing. 1948. The Democratic Republic of Vietnam, the DRV, issues the only stamps printed during this time. The purpose? To show that the DRV is the only legitimate government in Vietnam. Stamps are printed with poor quality paper and ink, somewhere in the jungle. The Viet Minh used the surrendered Japanese weapons against the French guerrilla style, attack and disappear. France issued these stamps in September 1945. They make use of a world map displaying French colonies to highlight the fact that France expected to return to these colonies and continue to govern them as before. How the Viet Minh won the hearts and minds of the North Vietnamese. The famine relief stamp was a reminder of the 1 million North Vietnamese dead from a French-Japanese-caused famine. This overprinted stamp was a reminder of the Japanese surrender to the Viet Minh, which gave them both a stamp printing plant and enough armaments to create a powerful army. The excellent quality Ho Chi Minh stamp, once again printed in Hanoi, celebrated the French recognition of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. The poor quality Ho Chi Minh stamp recalls how the Viet Minh retreated to the jungle after the Haiphong massacre to regroup as a guerrilla fighting force, and the war progressed. The French Indochina War ended at Dien Bien Phu, July 5, 1954. These stamps have illustrated events and answered questions that in some cases have been ignored for decades. This presentation is just one example of ways stamps and stamp collecting can lead to fascinating discoveries about history, about the story of our times, or the stories of our individual lives. Stamp collecting, combined with a few basic computer skills, can entertain, enlighten, and educate.